Unfortunately, I'm sad to say that we're very far off. There's some, head-reeling statistics that show that women in Africa make up 60-70% of the workforce, especially in the rural areas. But you find that they earn 10% of the income and they own 1% of the property. So in terms of inequality, that is mind-boggling. So what we find in Africa is that there are religious and cultural barriers to women empowerment. And till today, there still exist laws, some customary laws, some statutory law, that bar women from being able to own property or inherit property from their husbands or from their fathers, and all sorts of obstacles to women's freedom to undertake commercial activity. And so it is a mindset thing, and we need to work not just at a macro level, but at a micro level as well. Because the changing of the mindset is not just with the women, but also with the men. And so what we find is that it will take collaboration. It will take working with governments, working with the private sector, working with development finance institutions to ensure that an enabling environment is created for women entrepreneurs, to ensure that women entrepreneurs get the training and capacity building that they need, the soft skills that they need to understand that if you can conceive it, you can achieve it. There are no barriers. You are your only barrier. And as well as the funding, we need to ensure that we bridge the gap to access the finance for women entrepreneurs.
No, you actually took me to my next point, which is bridging the gap to access to finance. There is still about $40.2 billion US dollars, at least according to the World Economic Forum, financing gap between the men and women. How do we deliberately go about bridging that gap?
I think a good place to start would be to look at the statistics. So most people that lend or give access to finance, the major thing they're worried about is, will I get this money back? Will there be payback? But statistically, women are found to pay back their loans 90% of the time. In fact, some statistics show 95% of the time. And that the 5% that they don't pay back their loans is their husbands that stop them on the way to the bank. So what we're finding is that women, because the burden of the household is primarily on the woman, it's the woman that ensures that the children are in school, that they're clothed, that they're fed, and it's the women doing the work, at least as we see it in rural Africa. So what we need to do is to have a little faith in the women and to know that they are capable, as much as their male counterparts, to paying back the funds. I think when we come to microcredit, women are getting a lot of microcredit, but we need to take that all the way up the ladder. We need to give women access to finance, not just when it comes to microcredit, but when it comes to 6 figures. That's what we need to see.
With that, then that means there's an issue of women businesses being able to scale up. Now, we don't see as many women-led businesses scaling and reaching that Fortune 500 African context of companies. How do we get startup businesses, especially led by women, to be able to scale up to that?
And so that is why we at the foundation are particular about women representation in the program that we run. So as you know, the foundation has the largest private sector-led entrepreneurship program on the continent, where we identify, train, mentor, and fund thousands of African entrepreneurs. The initial commitment was 10,000 over 10 years. We're now 5th year, and by the end of this year, we would have trained and funded 9,000. So we're smashing that glass ceiling. And what we're finding is that with capacity building, with training and funding, you're able to scale businesses. You're able to, first of all, allow startups to prove their concept and start their entrepreneurial journey, but you're able to also give medium-sized businesses the platform that they need and the connections that they need to scale. Because what we find is that our alumni have gone on to raise millions of dollars in additional finance because of the platform and exposure we give them by connecting them to global investors. So we have found a tried and tested model in the entrepreneurship program that we run, and what we're looking to do is scale, because a lot more women across the continent need access to this intervention.
Do you feel like legislation across the continent is moving fast enough?
It's not moving fast enough.
How do we get it to move fast enough?
That is why we need to work with governments. And that is why at the Tony Elumelu Foundation Entrepreneurship Forum that happened this year in July, we had 5 African presidents. And what we do is we bring the African presidents into the same room with their entrepreneurs so that they can hear direct from the horse's mouth. This is what we need to create an enabling environment. And so we know that African governments, they are committed. The will is there, but we now need to find a way to translate that will into action. And it needs to trickle down, not just with the presidents, but with the civil servants and the rest of government. Everybody needs to come on board and to know that it's one thing to change the laws, it's another thing to implement these laws. We've seen it with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. We've changed the laws, we've put the laws in place. Implementation is the key, because without execution, then everything is just a brilliant idea. And so to execute something like the AfCFTA, we have to ensure that the infrastructure is in place. We have to ensure that there are no fragmented markets. And technology is one thing that will help us do that. So we have tefconnect.com, which is our technology platform that's connecting the entire African entrepreneurship ecosystem. And what this is doing is to ensure that no matter where you are in Africa, you can connect with your African counterpart anywhere in Africa that they are. You can sell to them, you can exchange ideas, you can train with them, and also open your services and goods up to the rest of the world. So we need to leverage technology. I think that's the missing link.